Hi, what a lovely day today. I thought I'd sit outside and read the book to you outside because the weather's so gorgeous. Chapter 9, The Big Fight. The next morning, I told Josie, Michael and Tom about the unexpected adventure my mum had taken me on, and they all said they wanted to come with me next time and meet the man in the red turban with the king's heart too. None of them had ever seen the inside of a pomegranate before, so I tried to describe the colour and shapes of the seeds to them on the bus to school. But they still looked confused, so I drew them this picture on the back of my exercise book instead. I think pomegranates are now my most favourite fruit in the whole wide world, not just because of the way they taste, but because of how they look. On the outside, they look like extra shiny balls that have been dipped into a bucket of sunset colours like peach and pink and gold. But the inside is even cooler, because when you pull one open, it's like finding a million sparkling red rubies all squashed together inside a round suitcase and bursting to get out. You have to push each one out gently, Mum had said when she'd cut mine open and shown me how to pop the seeds out. See, as if you were plucking out jewels from the roof of a cave. She showed me how to peel off the skin lying between the seeds too, but I didn't like that part so much because the peelings looked like bits of old snake skin that I'd seen at a zoo once. I meant to give the pomegranate to the new boy at home time, but I was so excited that I couldn't wait until then. So as soon as the bell for first break began to ring, I hid the pomegranate under my school jumper and hurried out into the playground with it. We're not allowed to take fruit into the playground because we're only supposed to eat snacks in the dinner hall. But I wasn't going to eat it or make anyone else eat it, so I didn't think it counted. The new boy followed us out because he knew we were his friends now. He had stopped disappearing every break time and only went to have his seclusion during lunchtimes. Even Mrs. Hemsey had stopped coming out during first breaks and went to the staff room, which I think meant she knew we were the new boy's friends too. "Here," I said as soon as we got into the corner of the playground, and pulling the pomegranate from underneath my jumper, I held it out for him. "It's for you." Josie and Michael looked at each other and Tom looked at me as we all waited for the new boy to say something, but he just stared and stared, first at us and then at the pomegranate, and didn't say or do anything. "Knew you should have put a sticker on it," whispered Tom, shaking his head. Then, slowly, the new boy reached out and took the pomegranate in his hands. "Home," he said quietly, his lion eyes getting very big. "I have home." "Yes," I said. "Your home in Syria. I've seen it on a map, you know, map?" The new boy felt quiet, and then, for the first time since we had met him, he smiled. Not a small smile, or a side smile, or even half a smile, but a real, proper smile that went from one cheek to the other, and which made his eyes smile too. He opened his mouth to say something when suddenly Brendan the bully pushed past us. "Gimme that," he said, and he snatched the pomegranate from Ahmed's hands. "Give that back," I shouted, feeling scared and angry all at once. "Make me," sneered Brendan the bully as he turned around to face me. I don't know why, but sometimes when someone you don't like looks at you straight in the eyes, they suddenly seem to grow taller and you suddenly seem to grow shorter, even when really you're both the same size. Usually it's only for a few seconds and then you grow back to your normal height again, but sometimes it goes on for so long that you wonder if you'll ever get back to the height you used to be. This was one of those times. When Brendan the bully turned to look at me, he stared into my eyes so hard and for so long that he seemed to grow by at least 2 more inches. But I was feeling so hot and angry that I could feel my ears going red and I didn't care. I took a step forward and tried to grab the pomegranate back. "Go on, try again," laughed Brendan the bully, as he whipped it away and held it high above his head. I could feel my face getting redder and redder and my legs getting shorter and shorter as I tried to jump and snatch it back from him. And then suddenly, he threw the pomegranate at Chris, who was standing behind me. Chris caught it and tossed it up and down in one hand, waiting for one of us to try and do something. Josie and Tom and Michael all lunged forward, but Chris was too quick and threw the pomegranate to Liam, who quickly threw it back to Brendan the bully. This might have carried on all break time because Brendan the bully likes playing this game and no one has ever beaten him at it. But then what happened next was so unexpected, so shocking and so fantastic that even Brendan the bully didn't know what to do. Because suddenly, with a huge roar, Ahmed ran straight at Brendan the bully and like an angry lion crashed into him with his head. Brendan the bully fell backwards and onto the floor, his legs swinging up into the air. We all gasped out loud, but Ahmed didn't stop there. He jumped on top, with his face red and patchy, and punched Brendan the bully as many times as he could, shouting something that none of us could understand. Someone behind us cried out, "Fight!" and everyone in the playground ran over to watch. But, and this was the most shocking thing of all, it wasn't really a fight. You need two people, at least, to be fighting for it to be a fight, and Brendan the bully wasn't fighting back. Not at all. Not even for a second. Instead, he was holding his arms over his face as Ahmed continued punching and roaring and shouting at him with all his might. "Break it up now," shouted a voice as the crowd parted and Mr. Irons and Miss Sanders came running through. But Ahmed wouldn't stop. He was like a machine that didn't have an off button, and he continued to punch and punch and punch just as hard and as fast as he could. "Right, young man," cried Mr. Irons, and grabbing him by the back of his jumper, Mr. Irons lifted Ahmed up off Brendan the bully, whilst Mrs. Sanders pulled Brendan the bully back onto his feet. Everyone fell quiet, but I don't know if it was because we were all wondering what was going to happen next, or because none of us could believe that Brendan the bully had actually been hurt. His face was bright red, and his eyes looked watery, and there were tiny stones from the playground floor stuck to the sides of his cheeks. With a horrible glint in his eye, Mr. Irons stared down at Ahmed and shouted, "What do you think you were doing, boy, eh? Eh?" Ahmed stared angrily at the floor and didn't say anything. "Who started this?" shouted out Mrs. Sanders, who was so angry that she'd forgotten to look over her glasses and was looking at everyone straight through them instead. I immediately pointed to Brendan the bully, and so did Tom and Josie and Michael. "Right, all of you, with me, now," ordered Mrs. Sanders, dragging Brendan the bully by the arm across the playground and into the school. Mr. Irons flicked his hand and pointed to the doors, his nose whistling louder than it had ever whistled before. I followed Tom and Josie and Michael as we all hung our heads and made our way through the crowds. Everyone stared at us and then stared at Ahmed. His face was even redder than mine, and his lion eyes were so big and wet it looked as if they were drowning. He wiped away an angry tear and looked back over his shoulder. I looked back too and saw lots of bright pink spots all over the ground. The pomegranate had smashed open, and all its ruby red seeds had been crushed beneath everyone's feet. After we told Mrs. Sanders all about what had happened, she gave me 50 lines to do for taking the pomegranate out into the playground, and said that Ahmed and Brendan the bully had to write lines every night for the rest of the week with Mr. Irons. We tried to tell her and Mrs. Khan that the fight wasn't Ahmed's fault, and that sometimes hitting someone when they're being horrible and taking something that's yours away from you can make you feel 100 times better than just telling a teacher ever would. Even 1,000,000 times better. But they just shook their heads and said that Ahmed should never have hit Brendan the bully. We didn't say anything after that because sometimes you can tell when grown-ups won't listen to you anymore. Usually say, "That's the end of it," or "I've said my piece," or "That's that." But teachers always say, "That's all, you can leave now." As we left, I told Ahmed that I was sorry for getting him into trouble and that I would try to find another pomegranate for him. All he did was give me a nod and the thumbs up. I think it was his way of telling me not to worry, and that being able to roar like a lion on top of a bully was worth doing lines for, even if it was hundreds of them, in a language he didn't know how to speak yet. As we all went home that afternoon, we talked about the big fight, and how Ahmed was going to be famous because he was the first boy ever to have beaten up Brendan the bully. "You wait and see," said Tom. "Everyone's going to want to be his friend now, even the cool kids." I guess Tom was right, but it made me feel sad. If Ahmed made friends with the cool kids, that meant he wouldn't be able to talk to us or play football with us anymore. There's a law that says cool kids can only ever hang out with other cool kids, and that they mustn't ever talk to us, except for when they're put in a group with us by a teacher. I don't know who wrote the law, but Michael knows all about it. I guess his mum must have told him. But it turned out Michael was wrong about the law, because Ahmed never stopped being our friend, not even after he became the most popular boy in school for beating up Brendan the bully. And not even when all the newspapers in the world made him the most famous refugee boy on the planet. Chapter 10. War and Missing Pieces. On the day after the big fight, just as Tom had guessed, Ahmed became famous. In the playground, wherever he went, people pointed and gasped and called him the boy who beat Brendan the bully. And they asked him lots of questions like, is it true you can do 100 punches under a minute? And what were you really fighting over? Was it your parents? Ransom money? And when are you going to fight again? Can we come and watch? After a while, Mrs. Hemsey began to tell everyone to leave Ahmed alone, so everyone started asking Michael and Josie and Tom and me their questions instead. I didn't say much, and neither did Michael, but Josie and Tom got so excited that they started to add new bits to the story, so that by the end of the week, most of the school believed Ahmed hadn't just beaten up Brendan the bully, but had fought Chris and Liam too over a suitcase full of red diamonds and a pink basketball. All of this made Brendan the bully scowl more than ever, but even though he stared at us all the time, and Chris and Liam showed us their fists whenever they saw us, they didn't chase us around the playground or steal Josie's football or smash into us when we were carrying our lunch trays like we thought they would. I bet he's scared of us now that we've got Ahmed, grinned Tom. Yeah, said Josie, he's a proper scaredy cat now. But Michael said he didn't like it one bit, and that he bet Brendan the bully was up to something. At first I didn't believe him, but then lots of strange things began to happen to Ahmed. The first thing happened just 2 days after the big fight. We all had been decorating a new pot for our photosynthesis plants, and Mrs. Khan had given Ahmed a golden star because his plant had grown faster than anyone else's. I think that was because every morning, before Mrs. Khan called the register, he would water it and talk to it for 1 whole minute. I didn't know that plants could speak different languages, but when I asked Mrs. Khan about it, she said plants could speak every language under the sun, and that the more languages they heard, the faster they grew. Ahmed was really proud of his golden star, and he got a silver one too for decorating his pot with pictures of seashells and whales and fish. But when we got back from last break that afternoon, his pot was lying broken on the floor and his plant had been stamped on. Someone must have smashed it on purpose because nobody else's plant pots were hurt at all. Mrs. Khan said that if the person who did it didn't put their hand up right away, they would be in big trouble. But nobody did put their hands up. So the mystery of the murdered plant pot stayed a mystery. Then, almost exactly a week after the mystery of the murdered plant pot, came the day of the deathly worm tray. After assembly one morning, Mrs. Khan told us all to get our workbooks from our class trays. But when Ahmed pulled his open, he found it bursting with a whole pile of large, fat, wriggling worms. He cried out and dropped the tray on the floor so that all the worms went flying across the room. That made Dean, who sits on the table behind me, be sick all over his table. Dean is scared of anything that doesn't have legs on it, even snails, but he hates worms the worst. Mr. Whittaker, the school cleaner, had to come and clean it up, and Mrs. Khan and Mrs. Hemsey were very angry and checked all our trays, but no one else had a single worm in their tray, not even Tony the nose picker, who likes to collect all kinds of strange things in his tray. Mrs. Khan told the person who had done it to put their hand up again, and this time she looked at Brendan the bully, as if she wasn't really speaking to any of us and only to him. But again, nobody put their hand up. So Mrs. Khan shook her head and said she was going to make sure that whoever it was would be caught soon and punished, not just by her, but Mrs. Sanders too. And then, after that, came the worst trick of all. The one that everyone in school later called the Great Baked Beans Bag Trap. Every morning, right before Mrs. Khan takes the register, everyone has to put their school bag on their own special hook at the back of the class, and we're only allowed to take our PE kit or homework or lunch boxes out when we're told to. Everyone knows whose bag is where because everyone's hook has their name on top. Just days after the day of the deathly worm tray, Mrs. Khan told us to get up and collect our PE kits from our bags, just like she always did on Wednesdays. But when Ahmed went to get his PE kit and unzipped his rucksack, a lumpy river of baked beans burst out and splodged and splashed all over him. Everyone cried out, "Ew!" and then instantly fell silent. Mrs. Khan was so angry when no one put their hand up again that she cancelled PE, and Mrs. Sanders came and told the whole class off. It was horrible, especially because Ahmed started to cry when he saw what had happened to his PE kit and his bag. I think everyone knew it was Brendan the bully who had done all these things, but no one could prove it, not even Mrs. Khan. After that day, the door to the classroom was locked every break time and at lunchtime, which stopped anything else from happening to Ahmed's things. But I wanted more than anything for Brendan the bully to be caught and to prove he was the criminal, so Michael brought his granddad's magnifying glass in and we all searched for clues. But we couldn't find a single one, not even in the school bins.